Have you ever noticed how your mood shifts when the room around you is spotless and every object seems quietly in its place somehow today? You walk in after a long day, drop your keys on a clear surface, and something inside you softens almost instantly without asking permission. We are told that loving a tidy home is just about cleanliness, discipline, maybe even control. But that explanation feels strangely incomplete to me sometimes. Because if it were only about hygiene, you would not feel that subtle wave of relief when the pillows are aligned and the floor is empty of scattered reminders. There is usually a hidden psychological reason behind that devotion to order, something deeper than dust or neatly folded blankets that we rarely talk about. Psychologists studying cognitive dissonance and environmental stress have long observed that physical clutter can amplify inattention in surprisingly measurable ways inside the human mind. When your surroundings feel chaotic, your nervous system often mirrors that chaos, raising cortisol levels and quietly preparing you for threats that are not there. It is almost unfair how a pile of laundry can trick your brain into thinking life itself is unraveling slightly at the edges. A tidy home, in contrast, can function like a controlled experiment, where uncertainty shrinks and your brain finally exhales after scanning for danger all day. The straight lines, the empty surfaces, the predictable placement of objects create micro moments of safety that accumulate without you noticing. Some researchers link this to the theory of locus of control, suggesting that organizing external space reinforces the belief that life itself is manageable again. And if you grew up in unpredictable environments, that belief can feel less like a preference and more like emotional survival during fragile early years. Order then becomes a quiet promise that tomorrow will not explode without warning. At least not inside these walls you carefully arrange. I have spoken with people who iron their sheets and align shoes perfectly, and they admit it calms a part of them they cannot name. They say it feels irrational, yet deeply necessary, like tightening the last screw in a machine that keeps their thoughts from rattling. Order becomes a ritual, almost meditative, similar to repetitive behaviors studied in behavioral psychology, where predictability soothes anxiety through gentle, consistent feedback loops over time. Every wiped surface gives the brain a tiny reward, a sense of completion that counters the endless unfinished tasks floating in modern life. There is also identity at play, because maintaining a tidy home can silently communicate competence, self-respect, and reliability to both others and yourself daily. In societies that subtly equate mess with laziness, people may internalize that bias and overcorrect, arranging their spaces as proof that they are enough somehow. But it goes deeper than social approval, because sometimes no one is even watching, and you still feel compelled to fold the blanket just right. Yet this devotion to tidiness is not always about fear or social judgment, and reducing it to pathology would miss something beautifully human and creative. For many, cleaning is a way of thinking, a physical dialogue with their thoughts where wiping a table feels like clarifying an inner sentence quietly. You can almost see cognitive load decreasing as surfaces clear, as if each removed object frees a small fragment of attention previously trapped inside you. And in a world that constantly demands attention, reclaiming even a fraction of mental space can feel like regaining ownership of your own mind. Of course, there are extremes where control hardens into rigidity, where a misplaced cushion sparks disproportionate irritation that hints at unresolved inner storms beneath calm. But even that rigidity began as protection, a strategy your mind crafted to negotiate uncertainty when other tools were unavailable or simply too overwhelming then. So maybe loving a tidy home is less about sterile perfection and more about building a small island of coherence in a loud, unpredictable world. It is a way of telling yourself that chaos may exist outside, but inside this carefully arranged space, you are allowed to breathe, think, and simply be. Sometimes that need for order is not loud or obsessive. It is quiet and almost tender, like adjusting a picture frame before sitting down to rest. You might tell yourself it is just a habit, but notice how your shoulders drop when the kitchen counter is clear and the sink is empty. That physical reaction is not imaginary because the brain constantly scans the environment for unfinished signals that demand attention. Clutter acts like an open mental tab, a reminder that something still requires energy, and too many open tabs slowly exhaust your cognitive resources. Researchers studying attention and cognitive load have shown that visual complexity competes for processing power, even when you believe you are ignoring it. So loving a tidy home can be a way of protecting your focus, of defending your limited psychological bandwidth from unnecessary noise. When you clean a room, you are not just moving objects, you are rewriting a small narrative about your capacity to transform your circumstances. You start with disorder and end with structure, and that arc mirrors the deeper human desire to turn confusion into meaning. It feels empowering in a subtle way, almost like saying, I may not control everything, but I can control this. And that sentence, even whispered internally, can stabilize a shaky sense of identity. Attachment theory offers another interesting lens here. A tidy home becomes a secure base, a physical representation of reliability that may have been missing emotionally. The neatly arranged living room stands in for the steady caregiver, always the same, always dependable. But here is the part that often gets misunderstood. Society sometimes mocks people who love order, labeling them as rigid, uptight, or incapable of spontaneity. Yet discipline and sensitivity are not opposites. In fact, many highly creative individuals maintain structured environments precisely so their imagination can roam freely without external distraction. Structure outside can create freedom inside, and that is the twist most people overlook. What appears like control can actually be a strategy for flexibility. By minimizing environmental chaos, you reduce internal friction, making it easier to respond calmly when real unpredictability shows up. Instead of wasting energy reacting to small messes, you reserve emotional strength for meaningful challenges. There is wisdom in that, even if it does not always look dramatic. Of course, balance matters. When tidiness becomes the only source of safety, life can shrink, and relationships may feel tense under unspoken rules about perfection. But when order is chosen consciously rather than compulsively, it transforms into self-respect rather than fear. Maybe loving a tidy home is not about impressing guests or meeting invisible standards. Maybe it is about creating a physical environment that reflects the kind of inner world you are trying to build. Calm, intentional, breathable. And perhaps the deeper question is not whether you like things clean. It is whether you are using order to escape life or to support yourself while living it fully. If you recognize yourself in this, do not rush to judge it. Observe it. Notice how you feel when you straighten a shelf or fold a blanket. Ask what part of you is being soothed in that moment, because self-awareness is far more important than the arrangement of any room. And if this reflection made you see your habits differently, stay curious with me, subscribe, and let's keep exploring the hidden psychology behind the ordinary things you do every day.